Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Hope you had a great weekend. I'm still kind of getting over a bug myself. One of the things that I saw on the weekend that I thought I would address that I thought was very interesting, I just didn't have a chance to do it because I was under the weather, was the Senate voting to accept the amendment to the second generation for what it meant to be a status Indian. Now, if you're not familiar with this, the original proposal was to adopt an amendment that would have only impacted about 5 or 6,000 individuals. So when the Senate adopted the change, what the change was that they were amending the what it meant to be a status Indian from us to being second generation out to having one parent that is status. So what this does is goes from impacting about 5 or 6,000 individuals to potentially impacting tens of thousands of individuals who now could apply for status if this actually gets adopted. Now, in likelihood, this change by the Senate still has a few more votes to go in the Senate itself. And then it has to pass several readings in the House of Commons. So the likelihood that this will actually enter legislation, from my 2 cents, is slim. There is a lot to do in regards to this in the court, in the parliamentary system. Now, given that the fact that we're going to be headed to an election in 4 years or sooner with a minority government means that it is likely that this legislation could actually end up dead in the system. However, should it make it through the system, which I truly believe it should, there are some interesting comments that I saw that were made for this amendment and against. One of the comments that I thought was quite impactful was the statement saying that anyone who is against this amendment is really against for the termination of status First Nations individuals, which, of course, if you know how this works, is exactly why it works the way it does. The government has always wanted to end its fiduciary responsibility to treaty individuals, and that has always been the goal. So to adopt a one parent as a valid source for a status Indian would mean that not only would tens of thousands of individuals potentially be able to apply to get their status back, it would ensure that the federal government's fiduciary responsibility would not only be increased, but potentially exponentially increased over successive generations if First Nations continue to have good birth rates. So you can see why I'm not super optimistic that this is going to go through the entire process unchanged, although I believe it should. A few of the other distractors from the conversation I thought was quite mind-boggling, but is where we're at in 2025, was those coming out and saying that this should not go forward because it will give rise to a whole bunch of pretendians or fakers. This is highly problematic. We have had a lot of trauma induced by the colonial government on what it means to be First Nations, who is First Nations, or Métis, or who in any one of the Indigenous groups in Canada. And so to come out at this time and say that, oh no, we can't do this because a very few and far between little group of people who might claim fake Indigenous identity might slip through the cracks. I think this is an erroneous conversation. And to that point, there were several other comments that I saw saying that the federal government needs to stay in its lane on this issue entirely, that First Nations communities know who they are, they know who belongs to them, and so that should remain in their jurisdiction. Now, of course, the federal government is going to disagree with that because the checkbook's involved and they don't want to write a check for anything or to anyone for any reason except themselves. So as long as the federal government is held to account to its treaty obligation, they're always going to try to diminish that responsibility. So while First Nation communities do know who they are, they do know who is part of their community, the government doesn't. Now there's this third party that believes that they can gatekeep, or that they should give that power to the federal government to gatekeep. And I think this is highly dangerous. Like I've said before, if there are people who are faking Indigenous identity, then the benefit they're getting it from or getting from it should be on the agency or organization that they receive benefits from. So if you pretend to be First Nations and you get an award or a grant or something like that, it should be on wherever you got that from or wherever they were able to receive that recognition and or funds, to tighten up how they give out those monies or recognitions. It's not on the federal government to do that. It's not their responsibility, and it shouldn't be. So while some good progress was made, I saw some back and forth. I thought that was kind of interesting. And that is what I had for you on a Monday. Like I said, I hope you're doing well. I'm still recovering from whatever crazy bug I got over the weekend. And as you can see, I'm still trying to set things up in a new studio. Got a little painting to do to make things brighter. So until next time, that's all I got for you. Please hit the like and subscribe. As always, please share. It helps us grow the show and beat the crazy algorithms on the social medias. And until next time, the jig is up. The Jig is Up is made possible in part by the Métis Federation of Canada, uniting Métis people from coast to coast to coast.